What's up, War Room? Welcome back. Joe, Connor. Hopefully, as you're watching this, the Knicks are up 1-0. You caught up on the pod yesterday. You're ready for another pleasant surprise on the feed tomorrow or Saturday. CR, how you doing? We're going to answer as many questions, some serious, some less serious, as we can in about 25 minutes or so. How we feeling?
Good. We got the Commanders' offensive, ideas pulling from their scheme. That video is going to drop this week, so we're going to do a little more rapid fire war room after the pod. But I think we're going to get through basically every question we've missed in the Discord.
We'll be emailing the film breakdown to One Jets Drive. Please partake. Please look at it.
Addressed to Mr. Engstrand.
Mr. Engstrand. You'll see plenty of this coming out of Memorial Day weekend, and we mentioned this in the Discord and on Twitter, but August 23rd, not August 22nd. August 23rd will be the date of our live show. It will be in New York City. It will be close to Grand Central. I will 100% announce the venue next week. I did mention it in passing in the Discord if you want to dig through all the messages and see it, but it's in there. Okay.
First New York City favorite.
It's a New York City favorite. You'll know the name when you hear it, and you'll be
Madison Square Garden.
Yes. Okay. First one, a little more serious. Not serious, but more straight. From Farmer 22. What percentage do you think this team has of actually being good and maybe winning 10 or 11 games, including they had a veteran receiver and defensive tackle? So that's like the 2006 team, right? They went 10-6 that year. And it was because the coach was better than you expected. The defense, despite lacking names, was better than they expected. They had like Victor Hobson and Andre Dyson and all these guys sort of punching above their weight for a year or two. And then offensively, you got a pleasant surprise season from Pennington. He didn't light up the world statistically, but he was good. He managed the game. Kotry and Coles were really good off each other in a very like simple offense. And guys like Cedric Houston and Kevin Barlow were pretty good. They were enough for what the Jets needed to do. So the percentage of that happening, they would need to add a veteran of consequence, I would say, at one of those two positions, if not both. It's probably like 20%, maybe 20 to 25%. It's hard for me to say it's anything more than that of the Jets winning 10 games because I haven't seen the Jets win 10 games in a decade. So mathematically, it's not likely, but 20% if you have that kind of model, and or Fields and Engstrand are good and like better than we expect and hit the ground running as rookies. And it's like, oh, like they beat the Saints and they beat the Falcons and they stole one from Miami and like they're 7-6 and now they're playing a team with an injured quarterback and they're 8-6. And I think even in that scenario, if they go 10-7 and they're a 6 seed, they're not going on like some crazy Super Bowl run and you're not going to be like, here come the Jets, but they'll be like, oh, wow, this was like a team that we didn't think could be a playoff team. And there's always one of those every year and they're in and maybe they're a little scrappy. And that 2006 team, I think they ultimately lost 37-16 to New England in the playoffs in New England. The game was closer than it looked on paper, though, if you go back and watch it. Yeah. Kotry had like an 80-yard touchdown in the first half. So that, I think it's about 20%. And somebody that kind of lines up to what someone asked me yesterday, like what's the percent chance of Fields being the guy for more than 1 year? And it's like 20 to 30%. It's definitely not more likely than not to happen, but it's not zero. So where are you at percentage-wise?
It's a weird one, right? Because revisiting that season, you realize the Jets, until the end of the year, played a lot of close games. Yes. I mean, even the win over the Dolphins on Monday night, they won 13-10.
Cleo Lemon was their quarterback, by the way.
Right. There's so many weird things from that season. Like the Jets weren't really, they were very middle of the pack.
They were definitely a DVOA disaster that year.
Yes, that's what I was trying to get to. I'm not calling them frauds, but sometimes in football, things go your way, and sometimes they definitely do not. Yeah. More often the Jets, they don't get the bounces. That year, they were a middle-of-the-pack passing offense. They were a below-average running offense. They were a middle-of-the-pack passing defense, and they were a below-average run defense. But at the end of the day, the Jets kind of found ways to win games at times. And to be fair, that was kind of a Mangini thing, is like, coming from the New England regime, it was, can we find ways to close games by getting an upper hand, whether it was special teams, whether it was discipline, whether it was, just making the right decisions from a coaching standpoint. And Pennington, it was a a very pedestrian Pennington year. And you look at the production of the team, like they had 1,000-yard receiver, which is rare in Jets history, by the way, up until Garrett Wilson getting here. So Garrett is their 1,000-yard receiver, but you brought up Kotchery. Kotchery was 39 yards away from having 1,000 yards. Like, who's the number 2 pass catcher on this team that's a 16-game season.
Yeah.
So there's no number 2 like that we expect. On the flip side of it, they didn't have a running back they didn't have anyone get to 700 rushing yards.
Kind of crazy.
Leon Washington had 650, Cedric Houston had 374, Kevin Barlow had 370, which is just kind of ironic because you can see a world where these are exactly Breece, Braylon, and Isaiah Davis's rushing totals. But then if you add in 700 to 900 from Fields, it completely changes your rushing offense. So that makes up for not having that number 2 wide receiver. And you're hoping the defense is an average pass defense, maybe even better. And the problem is the run defense probably reflects this team. So it's funny you went right to 20 to 25% because I right away was like 18 to 22%.
Yeah.
Like you say, Fields has a career year and the offensive line is really good and the Jets control the clock and run the football and they get some turnover regression or positive regression is real, where say this is the year Sauce has 4 picks, right? And say this is the year that Cisco has 5 and they fall on a couple fumbles where like Will McDonald has 2 or 3 strip sacks. Right. Imagine that. Yeah. So there's always a world in football, especially when you're not the Jets have this, like, because of their win total, have this weird outlook. And I've had a lot of non-Jet fans at NBC like ask me about this. They're like, why is the Jets win total 5.5? And I'm like, well, factor in that the way the line is set, they're telling you they think they're going to win 6. Because if you bet on the 5.5, there's no value. So you almost have to bet it up to 6.5. But so give me the Jets win 7 games. Trust me. That's probably exactly what I will pick them to win this year. It's where I've been hovering around. So I think with the Jets, you have a new staff. The problem with the Jets is I just think their run defense will stink. And I hope I'm wrong. Like, I think the Jets are a relatively talented enough roster on the offensive line. They have a true number 1 wide receiver. They have a number 1 running back that needs to be healthy. They can win games with this quarterback. I don't think he will win them games, but they can win games with this quarterback. And we've said the Jets have played a lot of quarterbacks over the years that they couldn't win with, right? They couldn't win with Zach Wilson. They couldn't win with Tim Boyle. They couldn't win with these guys. There was a lot of times last year they could not win with Aaron Rodgers. Like, he just didn't have it that day. He couldn't move. He couldn't make the throws. So the pass defense should be solid. But in this era of the NFL, if you can't stop the run, it is very hard for you to consistently play week in and week out. And the Jets need to show me that before I actually believe they'll do it.
All right. Next one from Tori. What Jets do you want to see on the Olympic flag football team now that flag football is an Olympic sport?
It's an easy combo, right?
Yeah.
It's between 2 guys.
I mean, I think with the way he moves, the sort of ballerina Michael Jackson jokes, Garrett Wilson would be the first guy that comes to mind by a pretty decent margin. Who's your other guy?
Sauce. Because so here's the rules. I've had to do a lot of research on this. I'm hoping I really want to be out there covering it. Like if I'm working at
new
NBC,
podcast,
I am going to fight very hard to be boots on the ground for that because it'll be unreal. So it's 5v5 and the rosters have 10 players. 5v5 is very small. Like I've played flag in college that we had a 3-man offensive line, full contact. So we played 8-on-8. So 5v5 is very, and I think it's 20-minute halves and you start on your own 5. You have 4 downs to get to, and the field's smaller. Yeah. The field is significantly smaller. It's much more narrow. It's not as long. The end zones are still 10 yards. And you have 4 downs to get the halfway mark, and then you have 4 downs to score. And if you don't get to the halfway mark in 4 downs, the other team gets the ball at their own 5. It doesn't stop wherever you got stopped. So, keep in mind the format matters here a lot, where there's no lineman in play. Like, it's just not. I wish they did the 3-man lines with contact. It was wild when we played it in college, but it's, they obviously don't want injuries and things like that. So it's just about Garrett and Sauce, because you can roster corner only players because you have a 10-man roster and it's 5v5. Sauce obviously would be in consideration if the U.S. thought he was one of the best pure cover guys in isolation. And you could argue that you could throw Sauce out there for a couple offensive plays because of his size. And see, Sauce is fast, but it's Garrett, and it's probably it's like Garrett, definitely saw, and you can only have one player from each team, by the way, which is why, like, you can't, like, in theory, we could be like, let's send Joe Burrow out there with his 2 receivers. Yeah. It's like,
good luck, Portugal and Spain.
Yeah. Good luck catching a jump ball against T. Higgins with your 5'7" corners. Ireland will have me out there. So it's probably just Garrett. Obviously, I don't expect a Jet to be on the team out of the 10 guys chosen, but Garrett is a sneaky, like, he'd be really, really good in this format.
Underdog Fantasy Eastern Conference Finals edition, Knicks Pacers. I'm looking at my higher lowers. I'm still doing my best ball drafts, but promo code Badlands for a deposit match. CR, Knicks Pacers. Give me a higher lower to keep an eye on.
I mean, just for the vibes, let's go lower on Haliburton on anything, right? And that's just me being wishful as a Knicks fan, right? He's such a good player. And like you said, it has just been so fun running best ball drafts since the draft ended. I've been running them literally every single day, all different kinds of tiers, trying to stack some different rosters. So we're rocking and rolling.
Promo code Badlands. Sign up with Underdog Fantasy today.